All right. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the annual general meeting of Tivan Limited for 2024. As you know, my name is Grant Wilson. I'm Executive Chair of the company. It's now 4:30 in Melbourne, and I call this AGM of Tivan Limited to order, and I gently remind people to silence their mobile phones. So thank you to Melbourne. Obviously a big turnout. I'm going to get asked this question online, so I may as well get rid of it. At the top, there's probably about 100 people here. That means there's one person for every $1 million of our market cap, roughly, which is a very impressive ratio. Even more impressive soon, though, will be that our market cap will greatly exceed the number of people in this room on that ratio. So thank you very much for turning up. We wanted to do it in Melbourne for a pretty simple reason, which is that the activism campaign that took root a couple of years ago against TNG, which led to Tivan, which led to everything that's happened over the past couple of years, started in Melbourne. Melbourne was a stronghold for us. It always has been. There's lots of friends here. There's lots of shareholders here, lots of sophisticated investors here. So today we're sort of bringing it home after 2 years of what's been a pretty epic journey, with lots of expectations ahead, and quite rightly so. So a chance tonight and this afternoon to share it amongst friends. Melbourne's turned on the weather. Very grateful for that, quite surprised about that. And with that, we're going to jump straight in. The agenda, in classic Tivan style, is front-loaded. We do everything front-loaded at Tivan, so we've left the formalities to the end. I think our auditor wasn't too happy about that, but that's the way it goes. We wanted to kick off with the real presentations and keep the energy in the room and focus on the story, so we'll pull through the votes and the formalities right at the end. I'll be talking for probably 30 or 40 minutes as we go. Then we've got a fireside chat like last year. In fact, let me back up. We have got a fantastic video, which will teleport all of you to the Kimberley for the past month. And when you see how spectacular the country is that we're working in and the friendships that we've built up there, I think you'll be as inspired as we are. Then it's to the board, so Guy, Christine, Anthony, and then over to the floor. So really believe in listed companies. One of the reasons we wanted to do a proper AGM is to afford shareholders that right to ask real questions. So we're all here for that purpose. And that will probably be 15, 20 minutes, so a significant amount of time for Q&A from the floor. So start thinking about what you want to ask, then the resolutions and voting, and then drinks outside. So without further ado, the company update. So the main theme of today reflects particularly the journey that we've been on this year. This time last year, we were in Darwin, and we had a core mission for the firm, which we'd defined through that frenetic and chaotic transition from TNG to Tivan as empowering grid storage. That was the big theme this time last year. Very much focused on the Vanadium asset at Speewah, and then those downstream use cases all the way to vanadium redox flow batteries. And that's a fantastic aspirational vision, but it's not ours anymore. Obviously, we went through a massive transition at the start of this year, pivoting to the fluorite project at Speewah, which has become our flagship and our centerpiece, and many changes since, including the elevation of the Sandover project near Alice Springs. And what we've learned through that big transition is considerable, and we knew that at this session with shareholders, it was time to update the strategic mission of the company and to explain why it is that we think we're uniquely well placed to achieve that mission, and why it is ultimately going to lead to significant accretion of shareholder value over time. So this is the new mission. We will have to update the website. I'll have to turn my phone off because I didn't actually listen to my own advice. Sorry about that. Oh, it's the government. And the government's relevant to this. And so what we're pushing forward with now, and what will be on our newfangled website, probably by Jan-Feb, is this centerpiece, this theme, this vision, this mission, which we all can stand behind and which we think Tivan is uniquely well placed to execute upon. And that reflects the learnings that we've all received over the past couple of years. Obviously, it's been an incredible journey. We're operating at an incredible pace across a vast landscape. The gold area, just for context, is, I think it's 2 million square kilometres comprising the Kimberley, and the Territory, 3 different land councils. So you've got the Kimberley Land Council, Northern Land Council, Central Land Council. That area is equivalent to the size of Saudi Arabia or Mexico, to give you a sense. So we're up there, we're well understood now, we're well recognized, and we believe we've got this opportunity to build a strategically important company across Northern Australia. Now, to build a company, and I've done this once before in New York, I fundamentally believe that you need to have comparative advantages. You need to be able to point to aspects of what you're building which separate you from peer and which provide a clearly distilled message to investors, to stakeholders, to government, to offtake partners, project partners, and so forth. I believe there are eight differentiating factors as why Tivan can achieve this mission where no one else can, frankly. So let me just pull through these really quickly. The first comparative advantage that we've got stems from the resources that we've acquired and the fact that we're operating in the critical minerals sector. Now, the critical minerals sector has been through this massive drought, this huge downturn, the whole time that we've been running Tivan. So we've been up against these massive headwinds. But that secular thematic is durably intact. And underneath any resources company, and especially a critical minerals company, you need world-class resources. We have that in Speewah. We've got an incredible fluorite asset. We've got an incredible vanadium magnetite asset. We've found what we believe to be an incredible lead-silver prospect. Silver, I believe, should be redefined as a critical mineral, and maybe in the future. And we've just acquired a second fluorite project at Sandover as well. So we're building a foundational layer of world-class resources on the cheap, if I may say. The acquisitions that we've pulled off, when we look back in time, they will be seen for the value-creating assets that we know that they are. And the fact that we've been able to acquire that from the starting position that we had is remarkable. So resources. Second is technology. We've probably got 2 main cutting-edge technologies at Tivan. The first is the Tivan Plus technology that we're working on a long-run collaboration with Cyro. The second is the fact that we're in a strategic alliance with Earth AI around Central Australia using artificial intelligence technology. That's really the cutting edge of exploration globally. We're very proud of that alliance. Roman's a genius. He's one of the most important entrepreneurs in the sector globally. And we think that inclusion of technology is a further way to differentiate Tivan, and it will be proven up in time to be a differentiating factor for the company. The third really distinctive aspect of Tivan now is our team, and we'll see a team slide at the end. As you know, when I walked in at TNG, we had to do some bloodletting, if I can put it plainly. So basically everyone got fired, and that was necessary given what had happened there, except for 2 of our most important people at the company now, being Brendan and Jason. And we built the team from scratch. And in building the team, we're focused on talent, focused on people who can work hard, youth, energy, camaraderie, teamwork. And I'd say particularly in the past 3-4 months, with the addition of some new hires through mid-year, the team has reached like an uber-productive state. I called it the other day internally the flow state. The company's operating with an awareness of each other, which leads to productivity gains without people even saying what needs to be done. We're across disciplines. There's a great hunger and desire. Everyone's unified behind this mission. There's an enjoyment to our work. People have been exhilarated by the past month in particular, being able to be out there on country, drilling. It felt like we were really running a mining company for the first time, super exciting. And so we've just got this incredible energy at the team, along with skills and talent and drive. And I think that will carry us a hell of a long way. Really important stuff. The fourth aspect of what I think really differentiates Tivan now is just to do with Asia. If we think about Asia, where we're operating through the port of Wyndham and Darwin, we're so close, and that's really important. But beyond that, we've built this relationship with Sumitomo Corporation in Japan. It extends well beyond that in Japan. I had to make a captain's call at the start in terms of which country we were going to focus on. It really came down to Japan or Korea. Japan was the right call, and you'll learn more about that in the next couple of weeks, which is super exciting. But when we think about Asia, we've got this durable advantage being so close in terms of proximity. A lot of companies are operating from the south. Those transit costs are really material when you get into project evaluation. And of course, Asia's about to go through a very, very significant adjustment under the second Trump administration with the imposition of tariffs. And so there'll be a world of opportunity up there for us. I've worked for Singapore's government. We've made incredible inroads in Japan. We've got another Asian country we're working with, which I can't talk about just quite yet. And so our ability to parlay what's happening in Northern Australia, particularly the huge investment that the governments are putting in, defence sector's putting in, creating a footprint up there so close is, in my view, a very durable advantage. A fifth is infrastructure, particularly at the Port of Wyndham. The Port of Wyndham's this almost forgotten port. It's out of a storybook. It's incredibly beautiful. And it's run by a private company called Cambridge Gulf Limited. Shout out to CGL, who've become our great partners up there. We've practically got the run of the port. We'll be one of their probably their most important customer. They did a fantastic job in hosting our guests from Japan. I think most people know that we hosted Japan at Speewah a couple of weeks ago, and explained the infrastructure that we've got and the way that we can mobilise that infrastructure in favour of the project. And that was really, really well received. And so the fact that we've got access to that sort of infrastructure, and then think about Middle Arm's still part of our playbook in Darwin. It's got a long way to go. There'll be twists and turns into the federal election about Middle Arm. We're involved at that table. It's an important table to be at. But that idea that we've got command of common use infrastructure, private infrastructure, the status and leverage to impact government decisions around infrastructure is really important. And that's part of the strategic vision of the company. I think a sixth differentiating factor for us, and this probably ties back to the Asia theme a little bit, is access to capital. We've shown, particularly over the past 18 months, a clear differentiated ability to raise money under adverse circumstances, probably the most adverse circumstances, if I can say. The company was functionally bankrupt when I stepped in. We had to buy Speewah in the way that we did, or else we couldn't. We had to incur debts. Then we went into a massive secular downturn, and you're trying to raise money with a restive shareholder base, no real narrative to hold on to, and capital markets which were effectively shut. Let me be quite clear about that. The companies that aren't raising money, it's because they can't. They cannot. And we've done 5 raises, all at minimal discounts. We've turned the company around by doing so. That's the small end of town. As we get to the project finance, which I'll talk about in a minute, you'll see the big end of town come in. And in fact, it's easier for me to raise money at the big end of town. And you'll see that footprint emerge through Christmas and again next year. So access to capital, our name and brand in Asia, the relationships we have, the senior people we have on our board is a hugely differentiating factor for Tivan as we think about implementing this mission. A seventh, I think I'm up to 7, is government relations. The phone just ringing. We've really done a fantastic job, I think, in promoting awareness of what Tivan represents, how our ethos and values is different, and that's embedded us in the critical mineral strategy rollout. We've written papers, I wouldn't say lobbied, but we've informed government decisions across a range of policy outcomes. That goes through Canberra, that goes to the NT government, increasingly in WA as well. The critical mineral sector is unique because government is trying to figure out how far it can lean in without disturbing what needs to happen in the private sector. And so those relationships are foundational. And I think I can share as well that as we bring the JV negotiation towards its culmination, the Japanese government is involved on the other side as well. So we're operating at that top table. It's a great privilege to be there. To go from where we were to frankly, the top of the world within 2 years, I think is a great achievement and reflective of what the company can achieve. The final real comparative advantage, I believe, which will differentiate Tivan in the years ahead and help us implement our mission where others, in my view, cannot, is our relationships with traditional owners. Now, most of you will know that I grew up in Alice. It was one of the big motivations for me jumping in, that I thought there may be a path for a company to emerge up north. That company is now Tivan. The relationships that we've forged across the land councils, but especially the actual traditional owner groups that stem from the East Kimberley through Darwin to Alice, are profound. They appreciate the way that we've engaged. They appreciate our inclusive approach. They appreciate our language, our sincerity, the gentle touch that our team has when they're operating in these sensitive and fragile regions. So it's really important. I think we've now inked 6 agreements with traditional owner organisations in the past year. 2 with the KLC, 2 with the CLC, 1 with Larrakia and 1 with Glen Hill. That is unprecedented in this part of Australia. So it's a tremendous privilege, it's a tremendous achievement, and I believe it's a durable achievement because it de-risks project delivery. Where other people are failing on this front, it's an opportunity for Tivan. So those are the 8 aspects of what Tivan's new identity is underpinned by. It leads to this compelling narrative, which is that we are uniquely well placed to build a strategically important company across Northern Australia. The centrepiece will be fluorite, but Tivan will be much bigger than a fluorite company. It's very important that people understand that. A final comment on this, and then I'll fast track the rest of the slides. There is a very important piece of this map missing, and it will be revealed in January, I hope. February at the latest. And when it hits, you'll see it in the context that I've presented today. There'll be an aha moment. That was the missing piece. So this is an initiative that I've been working on for a couple of months. Again, it relates to work that I've done, relationships that I've had in place for probably over a decade. It's a tremendous opportunity that we've got, and it will involve, like all these other opportunities that we're creating, a very small investment, which will over time lead, I think, to great incremental value at the company. Many of the initiatives that we're pursuing now are ultra low cost at the start, so that when the fluorite project at Speewah emerges into free cash flow, we're already 2 or 3 years down a project development pathway and then have the risk capital, have the cash flow to really accelerate the growth of the company. We're not shooting for like a $500 million market cap anymore, or even at all at this company. We're shooting to build a proper company with unconstrained upside and a clearly differentiated mission, which I've shared with you today. So thank you for that. Time check. Okay. Speewah. I'm going to pull through the content slides pretty quickly. The slide on Japan, there'll be questions. I'm sure this is a big preoccupation of our investors at the moment. We announced this landmark agreement with Sumitomo in June, and we said that we would agree binding terms on a joint venture with Sumitomo Corporation by the end of the year. We are on track. It's the most important conclusion today. If we weren't on track, we would have had to say something, because we've had an entitlement offer open for about 3 months, and under prospectus rules, if you're off track, you have to announce the negative news. So by inference, you can tell that we're on track, and I'm confirming that today. So not long to go. It's been the most important initiative of the company this year, almost my sole focus for the past couple of months, and a huge team-wide effort 2 weeks ago to host a delegation from Japan, a delegation which extended well beyond Sumitomo Corporation in Perth site and then Darwin, right across that footprint, which I just showed. It's a really, really important deal. Let me perhaps explain what it would represent if we manage to close this out before the end of the year. It would be the first ever investment by Sumitomo Corporation in a critical minerals project on a global basis. Not just Australia, global. And Sumi's been around for 400 years, because they're probably watching. And it would also mean we've created a new industry in Australia, or certainly a new sector. No one's ever done fluorite before in Australia, and we believe we have a pathway to 2 projects to provide that security of supply to Japan in an ultra-critical mineral, just as a time as the big tectonic plates in Asia are about to shift under the second Trump administration. So we're on track. It will be an incredible achievement for our small company to partner with Sumitomo Corporation, arguably the most prestigious and legendary trading house in Japan. 80,000 employees in the Sumitomo Group worldwide. Tivan, 15. Okay, so this will be a hell of an achievement. I'm locked in. I've got the best lawyer in Australia working with me on this. We've come through a lot of big deals in the past couple of years, and I believe we'll close it out by Christmas. So please be patient. It's a fundamentally important deal. It will be unlike anything else that's ever been done in Australia before in the resources sector. Now let me cut forward to next year on the premise that we secure this deal. I want to have the project finance for the Speewah Fluorite project locked up before FID. And so on this chart, the really only new addition on this chart for eagle-eyed shareholders is the blue question mark. So let me just explain a little bit, particularly for those that are familiar with project finance. Typically, when you get this far down the path and you've got a project finance partner, you will have what's known as a project equity gap. And this will be a number that you can calculate, and you'll be thinking about how am I going to fill that gap. Now, for many projects, and I won't name names in Australia, that gap is overwhelming. There's no prospect of them closing that gap. And they can't raise the equity as ordinary shares, they can't find a JV partner, and they certainly can't get creative like we will be getting next year. So what we're aiming for with the Speewah Fluorite project is to secure an anchor investment from Sumitomo Corporation, where Tivan still controls a very significant part of the project. We bring in the debt financing next year. This is the classic government agencies. I won't say too much about that, but you can imagine their propensity to lend money to a project where a major Japanese trading house is involved for the first time in critical minerals in Australia, in Northern Australia, and with great traditional owner support. So the debt piece can take shape, in my view, quite rapidly. And then we'll have a choice. We can issue ordinary shares and aim to fill that project equity gap, or we could sell part of our SPC standing for Special Purpose Company, to a financier. And I'm already working on that. That's how confident I am. We've already got a major sovereign wealth fund interested in this piece, and we have one of the world's most sophisticated alternative investment managers involved doing diligence already. And these are $100 billion type AUM accounts, major accounts. What that second route would mean would be that we do not have to issue shares. We do not have to issue shares to finance the Speewah Fluorite project. We'd be able to go all the way without that dilutive impact, which everyone else is enduring. So that's a taster for next year. And I think at the AGM, by the AGM next year, I'll be disappointed if I haven't been able to close that out, I think around Q3. At the AGM last year, I said I'd bring strategic investment to Tivan by Q2. We've done that with Sumitomo, heading down this incredible pathway. My aim for next year will be to have the entire project finance round more or less wrapped up well ahead of FID. And again, in the critical minerals sector, that would be an unprecedented achievement. So a bit more patience on Japan. It will be worth it. We're under an NDA. Please understand that I can't say more today. You have every right to be excited, and look forward to news flow before Christmas. Briefly on the schedule, this is for people online. All of the work, the frenetic work that we did, enabled us to cut through the approvals, the drilling, and advance the project as far as we could up until about a week ago. And then the rain tumbled down at Speewah. We knew that we were going to get rigs stuck, equipment stuck out there, so we demobilized rapidly. It's left us 1 or 2 months short of the schedule that we published mid-year, and this is the refresh schedule. And what I want to emphasize here is 2 points. Firstly, is that Tivan's operating at a pace which is completely without precedent in the critical minerals sector, and that we're still on track to deliver first production in 2027. So this is a 3 to 4 year journey to first production. That would be a completely unprecedented achievement in Australia, measured in years as well. So a couple of months, as I said last time, or at least on the internet, does not faze me at all. I'm mainly focused on making sure that we don't have big step changes in the schedule, and we have not had that. We've had a remarkable run of execution on the Speewah Fluorite project. So we provide, as part of our commitment to transparency, a very detailed schedule. You'll be able to track this as we proceed next year. We're very much on track, and we'll be sitting down with key stakeholders in the next couple of weeks and project partners. There's many contractors involved, and plotting out a full schedule of works, which will commence from March, April, as it starts to dry out up at Speewah. The next slide is to wrap up on fluorite and fluspar. I believe into Q1 and probably all of next year, we'll still have to push further on educating Australia, institutional investors especially, about why fluorite and fluspar is so important, why it is, I think, one of the most critical of critical minerals. And it's those use cases in semiconductors and EV batteries which separate it from the rest, but it's this feature here. These are data which we've compiled on a proprietary basis. The top chart shows China just hoovering in fluspar this year. That red line shows that in 2024, this year, they've already exceeded their record year of imports up until the end of October. Still got 2 months to go. There's an incredible amount of imports by China in fluorspar, whilst you can see their exports moderating. These data are custom cleared, so we can actually trust them, unlike most statistics that come out of China. So what this means is that China's already in resource preservation mode, even hoarding, and that's why the fluorspar price is at the highs, whilst other critical minerals have plumbed the depths. And I believe that trend will continue with one risk, and that is President Trump. I believe, and I'm quite close now with the new incoming administration, the new Treasury Secretary is a very close personal friend of mine and a former investor of mine, and I understand the remit that he's been given to join the administration, and I believe that it will involve the implementation of really significant tariffs on China, starting in about Q2. And the world will have to wait for China's countermeasures. And if China takes countermeasures in our space, the upside price for fluorspar is unbounded, and the strategic importance of our projects in fluorspar and of Tivan operating in Northern Australia also will then become unbounded. So this is the prize. This is why we're so focused on it. Our thesis is held up. Obviously, the pivot we made from vanadium to fluorite this year has been vindicated. So that's it on the Speewah fluorite project. To Sandover, more fluorite. This was incredible for us. Mid-year, there was a moment, I think, in our team. We do these team meetings and we're brainstorming, and I want to say Michael Christ came up with the obvious question in retrospect: why don't we just find more of this stuff if everyone needs it, wants it? And we already had tried that at a superficial level. We knew there was a resource in Tasmania, and it wasn't impressive, and we knew that it had various flaws in it. We knew that it was owned by Joe Gutnick. We're in Melbourne, so I may as well say Diamond Joe's name out loud. So there was no prospect of me working with that guy after my first run round. So we let that one go. But there was a couple of weeks later, our geologist, Michael Fuss, who's new, and Steve Walsh, who's become a bit of a legend up north, called me in this really excited tone. It's like, Grant, we found it, like this is the one. And in the archives, they'd found references to a drill campaign on fluorite, which had high 30s to 40% grades. The metallurgy looked clean, and we just couldn't believe it was 8 kilometres away from Sandover in Central Australia. So I then asked Ellen, who just joined us as the head of Northern Australia, I said, okay, this is your first big challenge, you've got to acquire this, and it's going to be an extremely difficult thing to do, because we'll be negotiating against 2 joint venture partners, up against a deadline which effectively we had to create with no cash in the bank. And I didn't want to take the company back into debt. We've lived this journey for the past 18 months. So there was a cap on what we could pay, and then we started doing diligence on the prospect, and we just got more and more excited. We know that the grade is going to hold up. We know that the metallurgy is going to hold up. We believe it's massive. We think there's more calcium fluorite here than at Speewah. That's what we think at this point in time. And we know it's at the surface. So you need 5 things. Those 4 all look incredible. There's one negative, obviously. We're 1,300 k's from a port, right? Now, we know that. We've modelled the transport costs. We know that from TNG, actually. And we believe that the advantages we'll have at that high grade, size, surface, and especially the metallurgy being clear, those advantages will more or less offset the disadvantage that we have on transport costs, meaning that the Speewah fluorite project could, in time, resemble the C1 costs that we've printed at Speewah. And we know the Speewah C1 costs are competitive, like competitive straight down the line with China already, which is incredible. There's not another critical mineral in Australia, project in Australia, which can compete head-to-head on price with China. Speewah can in fluorite, and we believe this project will look like Speewah in time. Now, we need a couple of years, but we spent 500 grand to get our hands on that. If it proves up, we'll spend $1 million. If the NPV is 500 million or $1 billion, that's a 500 to 1 outcome or 1,000 to 1 outcome. And that is a fantastic option profile. So I said at the top, we'd never beat Speewah as an acquisition, and now I'm not sure. I think this thing's going to be incredible. We've obviously spent about 18 months with traditional owners out in that region. Dnepa's on the east. We know the CLC intimately. The CLC hardly ever manages to get to exploration mineral deeds anymore, certainly not in a year. We're going to have two. And so we feel very good about where we are. We know that in Central Australia, to build a mine, the resource has to be spectacular. I think this is spectacular. And we hope that the lead silver is spectacular too. So this is, did I skip a slide? That's the acquisition. Let me just explain. We own the blue parcel, and we have exploration rights over the green parcel. And I do want to say thank you to Investigator. It is very difficult to do an acquisition where there's a JV involved. Investigator came to the table. They were forthright throughout. They ran a great deal process. There are wins in it for them as well, if we're successful and if they're successful. So we do sincerely want to be the best of neighbours. We've got shared exploration rights on the green area, so we'll be looking for fluorite. We know it's there. If we find it, we can put ML mining leases around it. They're welcome on our side to look for tungsten and other things. So it's a collegiate relationship, but we have tenure and title over that blue-purple area, and we believe that that will ultimately turn into a very significant JORC-defined fluorite resource. And we also know there'll be nothing else in Australia, not at the surface. So Tivan will then command the industry, giving us leverage and, again, strategic importance. On the Sandover, very briefly, we've made tremendous progress. This time last year, we were just sniffing around for little traces of copper and lithium with Earth AI's technology. There was this incredible moment in March, April-ish. I remember I was calling Guy, I was saying, we found something. It was just like this thrill that we found something really significant. And that was the lead at these crazy grades, 22%, I think, at the highs, and silver, a couple hundred meters down on the formation at 500 ppm. From that point, that's when we started our work with the Central Land Council and the traditional owners to be given the authority to drill. And we've, again, worked through a process that would take a normal mining company 3 to 5 years. We've completed that in 8 months. So I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners for acceding to the meetings that we requested. Been out there 5 times this year, and the Central Land Council, we're grateful for their support, particularly given the company was transitioning from this unbridled disaster at Mount Peak to now being on the cusp of exploring and drilling with the support of traditional owners. Now, we've got 1 month left in the year. Obviously, we've expended an enormous amount of energy. Our geos are pretty exhausted. We will have, I believe, permission to drill the lead silver wrapped up by early December. We already have permission to drill at Dnepa out in the east, and those same TOs will be the same TOs we're working with at the Sandover fluorite project, so that's fantastic. Whether we kick on in December and start drilling or doing the geophysical program depends on the weather, depends on a few documents just being finalised, and it also depends on the pasture lease station. As a mining company, we do have rights to go on and drill, but if any of you have watched that Netflix Territory program, you'll know that sometimes it's been dramatised, a bit over-dramatised, but you do want to get on with your pasture lease owners. The guys at Aileron, who are our friends, they're mustering around 2,000 head of cattle right around the site into Christmas. Geophysical programs with live electrical cables and 2,000 head of cattle with helicopters, that's not a good mix. So we might park it until January, but the intention is to do the geophysical and do the drilling program on the lead silver as the priority. So when you think about Sandover writ large, understand that we have cut through, we've got the right approvals within a year from the traditional owners, from the Central Land Council, from the NT government. Roman's done a great job in finding, particularly the lead silver looks really exciting. We just don't know how big it is, how deep it is, whether the grades hold up. We want to find out as much as all our shareholders do. I think it'll be January at this point because we want to respect the wishes of the pasture lease station and the TOs especially. Meanwhile, we will be out at the Sandover fluorite project, and that will be a fantastic moment doing rock chipping and verifying the hypothesis that we've got there. We'll be doing that in December, so there'll be news flow into January on that. Vanadium, in a couple of minutes, has become the least important of our priorities. We are working still with CSIRO on that technology. It looks really impressive at a desktop level. It has a long distance to go at the commercial level. There is third-party interest in it, even from a major in Australia. We're collaborating with them. We'll make some decisions into Christmas and Q1 on that. I do want to say that the vanadium salt work, test work program for Speewah has been incredible. We're bringing in recovery rates that are 4 or 5 percentage points above any other vanadium resource that we know of in the world. So the idea that Speewah may ultimately be a vanadium project, back to a vanadium project, but with infrastructure in from the Speewah fluorite project, it does look that it could head that way over time. Then we can bring that vanadium to Middle Arm to do the batteries. We could even build a vanadium battery down at Sandover to create or to cure the chicken and the egg problem that pervades vanadium companies in Australia. Tivan, let me be clear, is no longer a vanadium company. Okay, we're a critical minerals company, and we're aspiring to be strategically important across Northern Australia, and the tip of the spear for us is fluorite. Corporate, briefly, to close out. For those that believe in what we've done, that sympathise with what I walked into, that have been inspired, I think, by what we've achieved in such a small amount of time. The consistent refrain is, fantastic, but why isn't the share price higher? It is the most common conversation that I have. I would say, just be patient, a couple more weeks, you'll see. But also, I'd say that we had to go through this brutal process. You could call it recapitalization. You could call it deleveraging. We've called it balance sheet restoration here. The company had debts and no revenue. You cannot survive like that for very long. So we had to go through the cycle of cap raises. It's behind us now. We did a great job with the cap raises. You can see how productive the company is from the second table. If you use TNG, they're spending $4 million a quarter. We're at 2.5 this past 18 months. Look around the sector. Everyone's above us. No one has achieved what we've achieved. So these are great achievements for a small company, and a real focus of mine, which is, I think, at the heart of any great company, is productivity. Getting things done with minimal resources in quick time is the best way to measure the achievements of a team, of management, and on any metric, I really believe that Tivan is a standout in terms of capital efficiency and productivity of the team. This last slide, again, a little bit esoteric for people, but just let me make the point. And this is, again, to the TNG shareholders. Imagine if we'd taken over the company and done a share consolidation at the start. We could, maybe we do next year, and say, okay, we've got 100 million shares on issue. We're starting again. Right now, we'd be at 136 million shares, which is de minimis dilution given what we've achieved and given the starting point, which, again, was bankrupt. TNG was bankrupt, okay? So we've done 2 acquisitions now. We've turned the entire company around. Our market cap's higher than where it started. And importantly, for shareholders on a forward-looking basis, this line is about to flatten out. It's about to flatten out. We don't need to come back to the market in the way that we have, because we've completed the debt repayments of Speewah, and because I believe there's a path to project finance on the Speewah fluorite project that does not involve large-scale ordinary equity issuance. It's great to have received the special resolution. The government's telling me I'm talking too long. and we appreciate that. But the way through to a project is through joint venture and structured finance, not through ordinary share issuance. So if we manage to flatten this line out in the next year, which I really believe we will, you'll again be able to look just at that simple shares on issuance metrics and understand what an incredible set of achievements this is when measured on a sort of a classic financial metric. My final word is to the team to say thank you, and to the board to say thank you. The board that we put together, really high-profile people in Australia who took the plunge, who took the risk. You'll hear from them very soon. I'm not sure if they fully knew what they were getting themselves into with the junior resources sector or the company in the state that it was. I did advertise it as honestly and openly as I could. I think they knew what they were getting themselves in for with me, though, and I do want to thank them for trusting me throughout this journey. To the team, I want to say thanks. It's been an incredible privilege to work with you. It's great to see every single person on the team that we have really start to believe in themselves and to achieve what I think they're all capable of achieving. So I'm super proud of the team that we've built. There'll be more people joining soon, the circles, and there'll be a big build out as we head towards the project. But the culture that we've created, the high performance culture that we've created at Tivan will be sustained. So that brings to a close my remarks. And I think I'm now going to switch to a video. And so let me explain the video. This was an initiative that we had last year, but this year's different. For the past couple of months, we've been out at Speewah working with a lot of technical people on site on environmental aspects, drilling, and the team, particularly led by Steve Walsh, our Chief Geo, has been able to implement a really important on schedule, and they've achieved that against really significant adversity. So we wanted to share what it's like out at Speewah for us, for the team, and I want to thank Katrina here for putting together this great montage. It's 6-7 minutes, I think. And to Ben Brody as well. Ben's one of our great friends up in Kununurra. He did a lot of the drone shots. So without further ado, thank you. Hi everyone, Grant Wilson, Executive Chair of Tivan Limited. Here at Speewah site today. It's early November. It's about 42 degrees in the shade. I'm really excited to be here at the moment because we've just commenced our drilling program after a really frenetic period of activity at the company. We announced the Speewah Fluorite project back in January, and only 10-11 months on, we've commenced drilling. And that's a great credit to the team and all the work that we've put in this year, building on the foundations at Speewah that we set last year. It partly reflects the mineral that we're chasing at Speewah. Fluorite, we announced in January, it's got these incredible critical use cases in semiconductors and in EV batteries. It's a really unique opportunity that we have in Australia, and that was reflected in the landmark announcement that we made in June that we're working in strategic alliance with Sumitomo Corporation of Japan. Now, you'll be watching this at the AGM. We'll at that point be on the cusp of a joint venture with Japan. We're really excited about that development. And all I wanted to say today is thank you. Thank you for sticking with us through the course of the last 18 months. The transition from TNG to Tivan, it's been a hell of a journey. There will have to be a book down the track, but that's enough for me right now. What I really want to do is hand over to the team to walk you through what's happening on site. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. G'day, I'm Steve Walsh, Chief Geologist here at Tivan Limited. We're out on site at the moment at the Speewah Fluorite project. We've been out here for over a month now, completing our metallurgical test work drilling. It's been going really well. We're really happy. We've drilled a number of holes. We've had some great success. We've had some great looking core coming out of the ground, lots of high grade intercepts of really nice looking fluorite veins. We've drilled through a number of lithology types across a number of holes. We've had SRK hydrology out here. They've been completing water sampling as part of our baseline monitoring programs, monitoring bores. We've also had NG Civil out on site doing our civil and mining works, so they've been out here assisting us with preparation of tracks and pads for the drilling, as well as the ongoing rehabilitation post-drilling. Amongst all this, we've also had our cultural monitors out here on site completing cultural clearances ahead of any ground disturbing works when we're clearing tracks and pads. We've also had our environmental consultants out here completing fauna and flora clearances as well prior to ground disturbing works. So it's definitely been a lot of work behind the scenes, but it's all came together and we've had a very successful drilling program so far. I'll now pass you over to Reggie and John from Narangani Civil and Mining.
Yeah, my name is Reggie Madden. We're part of the Narangani Civil and Mining company that more or less would benefit, especially the works around here, and with the partner of John.
So Narangani is an ancient term, and it means refers to the cycle of giving back to the land. And from a spiritual point of view, it's about contributing to life in a way that is bigger than yourself. And that's fundamentally what our vision is built upon, that concept, hence the name. We achieved that vision through two organisations in our group. The first one, we've got Narangani Civil and Mining, the civil construction firm, and then we've got the Narangani Foundation. And so firstly, the Narangani Civil and Mining is a Tier 2 capable civil construction company that has the ability to manage and plan complex civil construction projects for mining and government infrastructure. The Narangani Foundation is critical to our vision. It's the mechanism for us to be able to engage Indigenous communities and provide a perpetual funnel of employment opportunities. So we use our civil construction projects as a platform for people from remote communities to come in and get licensing, training and employment either within our project or with overflow flowing into external job placement agencies, so that we don't just fill the jobs in the project, but we can create jobs beyond that as well. This project, we've undertaken a range of works from preparing the campsites, the hard stands, the access routes, clearance of drill pads, reworking with the drillers, with Tivan closely to ensure that the pad space is usable for the drillers and accessible. We've also conducted some road repair work to improve mobility and to maintain our logistical resupply routes in and out. For a remote project like this, that's obviously critical, especially when you have big rains. The grids that have been given to us for the GPS are in accordance with the environmental approvals in place. So prior to the job starting, we would GPS plot out all of the points to ensure that we're within that. Prior to starting any works, we also engaged with the fauna consultant and identified all trees that needed to remain within any of those areas, also flagged trees in areas of interest, near routes, in and out, etc., to ensure that we didn't disturb those areas. On the cultural side of things, we also liaise really closely with the cultural heritage monitors. We spend a lot of time with them, showing them all the locations that we're going to be accessing and ensuring that they were happy with the works that were going to be undertaken.
Being aware on behalf of significant areas, working in with the environmental, even the monitors that comes on board on behalf of working with the drillers and the clients that more even KLC appointed. But the main and the important things is being aware of the significant areas surrounds all these workplaces. It's an opportunity to more or less give the vision to the locals and the communities that they can benefit out of this.
This particular location and this corridor between Halls Creek and Kununurra could really use a project like this.
A final quick word from me, which is to say thank you on behalf of Tivan Limited to the traditional owners of the East Kimberley and to the Kimberley Land Council. We've been working in lockstep with the TOs for the past 18 months, 24 months at Speewah. There's no way that we would have been able to make the progress with the project without their support, without their engagement, without the trust that we've built. So we're looking forward to building on that in the years ahead, and certainly on behalf of Tivan, I wanted to say thank you today. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, fantastic video. Very much the company that we want Tivan to be. So please allow me now to welcome our directors to the stage. Christine Charles, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Guy DeBell, Dr. Anthony Robinson. And this is my point of relaxation. They're going to take over here, and I will just ask a couple of little prompts, and then it'll be over to our directors to share the journey. So, Guy, I might start with you, given what I just said, which was your induction to the critical minerals sector. It's been potentially 18 months. Everything and more than you could have dreamed of, I'm sure. But your thoughts 18 months in?
It's certainly been a ride, but it's also, I think, where we are, and particularly where we've gone over the course of this year, as you talked about earlier. I think the opportunity that we've seen and realised, and are on the cusp of realising in an even bigger way, particularly the critical role that the critical minerals sector is going to play in Australia's future, and particularly our relationships with Asia. I think it was going to be strong regardless, the relationships with Asia, but developments in the US has potentially made that relationship going to be even stronger. The Japanese in particular are very keen on developing very strong relationships with Australia across a range of critical minerals, and Tivan is extremely well placed to capitalise on that because of what we've got, and as Grant said, because of where it is that what we've got. I think the other thing which Grant also highlighted is, so when we were looking at fluoride at the beginning of the year, it looked pretty prospective, but now it looks a lot more prospective in the sense that in some of the data that Grant showed earlier, and Grant and I both like getting into the data, but the tightness in this in the fluoride sector in particular is turning out to be much more positive than I think we were even envisaging at the beginning of the year, and to be frank, probably more positive than the government envisaged when they put fluoride on the critical minerals at least at the end of last year. So, it's been a journey, but it's been a journey where the destination just is looking better and better every day.
So while we're doing reflections, Anthony, maybe over to you. It's been a couple of years. Obviously, you joined me on that 249. There are many people here that were involved in the 249 would remember it. I think we had this conversation recently. It struck me your comment about the decision-making flexibility, I guess, that we've shown, and the ability to pivot and pivot and pivot until really something clicked. So maybe, you're also the guy that introduced me to the concept of lifestyle companies. I remember you had this phrase at the top, and I was like, what's that? What's that? I don't understand what that is. And now I know. But yes, your journey, Anthony, and particularly those big decisions that we took in Q1 to shift again.
Thanks, Grant. I didn't introduce Grant to the idea of lifestyle companies as an aspiration. What we've got here is absolutely the opposite of that. What we were discussing a couple of weeks ago, and Guy's already touched on, how much more prospective the fluoride is than what we maybe thought it was when we were looking at it 6-12 months ago. But what we have as an organisation, and I have discussed this with some of the shareholders as well, is what we got when Grant came on board was very pragmatic leadership, and pragmatic leadership that's focused on delivering value for the shareholders and making Tivan a successful business. And what we've been able to do over the last 24 months under Grant's leadership is always be looking for the right opportunity that's within our horizons to increase the opportunity for Tivan to be successful. And that led us to switch to SPIWA, and it led us to switch to the fluorite when the fluorite became sensible. And then what's happened since then has really underlined how important fluorite's going to be and how prospective that opportunity is for Tivan and the shareholders, and the fact that it then builds a base for further opportunity on top of that. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we did come into a very desperate situation that was quite different to what we believed we were going to get to when we arrived in September and November 2022. And what we have now is something that is highly prospective. It's very attractive to all of our business partners. It's attractive to all of our stakeholders. And it's something I think where we can be very proud of the focus on and the uncovering of value.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anthony. And thanks for for being on this journey. Christine, I mentioned in my comments the importance of the way I think that we've approached the traditional owner landscape. You helped write, in fact, co-authored the critical minerals strategy submission that Tivan made to the government right at the top. That was January of 2023, and we were just getting to know each other. When you write a document like that together, you learn a lot and quickly. And it's still something, that document, that has shelf life. I think it's sort of like a manifesto. It was great. I think we collaborated really closely on the traditional owner aspects, the phraseology, the words, the language of Tivan, and now we've lived it as well. So I think, particularly here in Melbourne, because we're operating so remotely, it's hard for people to understand it potentially, the challenges, the opportunities. But you've lived it in many different guises of your career, and if you could share your wisdom, I think, in that area, to be really helpful.
Well, I'm not sure about wisdom, but I'll have a go at sharing some thoughts.
I'm sure.
Look, I think what's not often understood is country, when you get outside the cities, is layered with meaning and layered with history. And not only traditional owners, but pastoral leases. There's all this complexity about how people see country. And one of the most critical things in thinking about mining, I mean, because, ore bodies, you can't pick them up and take them somewhere, so you're pretty much stuck with where they are. Thinking about land access and thinking about what that looks like in a long-term relationship is, in my view, absolutely critical for de-risking. So a First Nations perspective, I think, is actually opening yourself up to understanding someone's point of view that actually has, we talk about connection to country and a relationship for country, but I've worked with communities all over Australia, and I've been in the industry a long time. And I remember in the Tanami, some elders being so distressed about a sacred tree that was cut down, because for them that actually was causing sickness. So there's a kind of deep connection to country. And I've again watched at the small cap end a lot of people that are well-meaning but don't put the effort in. And what I think is different about the Tivan journey, this was an interesting kind of debate for us at various times, this was an area that was a kind of an incredibly fast learning curve for you, is the capacity to understand the importance of building those relationships from the bottom up. I can't think of many people in Grant's position that have spent the amount of time on country. And when you're out there, you're dealing with very smart people. You may not have the cultural framework that's the same, but you're dealing people with often very good politicians, a really good sense of their own country, and who are looking and often very open for a journey that has shared benefit. And what I believe we've actually been able to pull together in Tivan, and it's always a team effort to do this, is actually taking the time to understand, to be respectful, to be commercial, because we have moved quite fast, but understanding that at each point none of that would happen unless we could not only work with TOs on the ground, but the institutions that sit there. So the Central Land Council, the Northern Land Council, the KLC. So I truly believe this is a competitive advantage for Tivan, because I've seen it go very badly. I've worked with Newmont at the big end in similar kind of places. And what I think we've done is, by building those relationships, not only land access, but exploration, business continuity, the development of these projects in a shared benefit kind of framework, is probably the best way for us to de-risk moving forward.
Okay. So Guy, back over to government for a second. We've seen policy rollout, especially the critical minerals production tax incentive, which I know you've been involved with. Guy's obviously extremely well known and, if I may say, very influential in Canberra. So where do you think Canberra is in general on not so much the energy transition today, but specifically on critical minerals, bearing in mind we've got an election coming up as well? So.
Yeah, so I think, one, I'm pretty confident that critical minerals is bipartisan, the support for that, so that's probably somewhat, it is resilient to any change of government, should that happen or not. So I think that's important. The second aspect, which is very much critical minerals as the bridge, particularly to Asia, possibly to the US, but where most of the action is, and we're a living example of that at Tivan, is the relationship, is the opportunity in Asia, and that's very important at the government level, both federal and state. The state governments of certainly WA, NT, South Australia, very interested in the involvement of Japan and Korea, which you mentioned earlier, in the critical minerals sector in Australia, in joint ventures, and we are, one of the best embodiments of that at the moment. And so it's a primary focus of the government looking forward, and so they are prepared to support opportunities in that sector. As I said, I think I'm pretty confident it's resilient to any change in that, because I think it's a bipartisan support for that. And as I said, you highlighted the comparative advantages that Tivan has, and we are just smack bang in the middle of that sweet spot of critical minerals and Asia, and particularly, in our case, Japan.
I agree. By design.
Yes.
Anthony, you get one factoid question because I'm tired of getting asked this question and you can answer it because no one seems to believe me when I say it. Was the original Tivan technology a bust?
Was it
A bust.
a bust?
Yeah. Come on.
So we, you walked in the door and you said, Anthony, what the hell's going on? And why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, I couldn't tell you because I was on the board. And we dealt with the things that we dealt with up front, and then we got to the technology, and we went through the process. And the answer was like, even this doesn't work, right? I mean, that was So that was February or March, and then we had to go through a very careful process after that. And I think everything's been properly announced that I can say.
Yep.
When we got that revelation, even that doesn't work, and so that's why that is being worked on.
Yeah. And I don't mean to be, in any way flippant about this. We know that there was many millions of dollars of shareholders' capital that was spent or invested in this technology pathway over a very long period of time. Yet I'm still somewhat surprised it comes up in conversations and online, the decisions that Anthony and I had to take at the top and why it is that we stepped off that technology. We did it for the right reasons. We found a pathway with Cyro. It's a long pathway, but it's a pathway that has integrity. And without integrity in critical mineral processing, which is one of the most complex areas, you will go nowhere. And that's what it was lacking. That was what was lacking.
And I'm very comfortable that we are investing in that because that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Okay. So you got a tough question. Christine, you get the final, perhaps it's not a softball question, it's a very important question, but I know it's also a topic which is important to you. When I look at the team in particular, I think 2 of the new hires are women. So I believe when that takes place, probably January, that we'll have more women than men in the team. So it's not by design, it's based on merit. From my perspective, I've got very strict processes that I use in building out a team, and in any company or division that I've run. When I was working for Singapore's government, it was the same thing I was looking for, the same ethos I was trying to instill. But it may turn out, for a while at least, that Tivan will have more women than men in executive roles. So your thoughts on that and the broader mining sector on gender?
Well, I remember when the Minerals Council years ago asked me to chair a women in mining roundtable, and I said, can't you find a man who's a CEO to, it'll just be marginalised, right, if it's a woman chairing it. And in some ways, I believe diversity is a driver of value, right? And I think gender's one of those components. So I think for me, the diversity agenda is a really strong driving corporate need. And if you look around the boardrooms of Australia, and if you look across small caps, which are often, interrelated and very similar kind of backgrounds, the lack of diversity is one of the things that gets away of speed of decision making, of trust, of culture. One of the things that I've been very clear about is that we've been quite nimble, but we've also done it really properly. And we've actually done it because we've got a very excellent group of people that have put in incredible effort to be able to respond quickly and give confidence that we're making decisions based on evidence. There's always a kind of spot the opportunity. So I'd like to think that, as someone who spends most of my life in boardrooms where I'm often the only woman, and so I did grow up with 6 brothers, so that kind of helps, really. And they gave me no quarter. But I think if we can kind of get to the point where the value you give is actually more important than the personal attributes you've got, then we will end up with a diverse team. And so I think this is actually part of that journey going forward. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's the fireside chat aspect wrapped up. We'd now like to hand over to the shareholders who own this company. It's really important, as I said at the top, that the board's here, open, transparent, ready to answer your questions. It's been absolutely frenetic, and sometimes it is hard to distill the well-meaning questions, the constructive criticism from things which perhaps are not so constructive. But the mainstay of Tivan is accountability. We've made huge calls at the company all the way through. We're here, we're accountable, we believe in the company, we believe in the mission that I've laid out today. But for the next 15, 20 minutes, or however long as you want, the floor is yours. Feel free to ask anything to anyone. Larry, you get to go first, of course.
First of all, I think on behalf of all long-suffering shareholders, I think we owe you and your team a magnificent vote of thanks for basically taking a company that was on the verge of oblivion and bringing it back. The acquisition of Speewah was just absolutely brilliant. Now, I dealt with Japan for over 25 years, so I know what it's like dealing in Japan. And for you to have been able to forge a relationship with a Fortune 500 company like Sumitomo, again, is remarkable. So I really do genuinely feel that the company now is on the verge of becoming a major critical resource company in Australia in the future. So having said that, I wanted to get that recorded. Now, my question, the question is, two things which I didn't quite understand. Where are we with Tivan Plus? And the second question is federal and state finance. Is that on the table?
So I can be pretty brief. On the Vanadium, it was a simple chart in the interest of time. I believe Vanadium has a very big future, but it's just not yet. It's just not yet. And I don't believe there will be a vanadium project built in the country, and I've looked at all of them. So it's up to us to find the right time. I think there will have to be restructuring of how the vanadium market works, potentially involving a radically different approach to offtake, leasing of vanadium electrolyte, complex long-term derivatives, conversations I've been having with Guy and he's been having with Canberra. And for us, there's plenty of time to work through the best technology. As Anthony's alluded to, what we saw in the original Tivan was not a pathway that we could countenance. The Tivan Plus technology, it looks much better at the desktop level, but it would have to go through a pilot and it would have to hold up commercially. It's very different coming out with results which look genuinely fantastic, and a great credit to Cyro in these huge vanadium recoveries and grades that they're achieving, and most impressively, they're very high grade on the iron oxides, which could be a feedstock for LFP batteries and green steel. Fantastic achievements, scientific achievements. To bring that into the commercial world is a 5 to 10 year journey, in my view. It's expensive as well, and you'd want to risk share. So I think we've got plenty of time on the Tivan technology. It's going in the right direction. It's in competition. For those that have been really close to what I've done, you'll know that one of my golden principles is competitive tension, keeping competition in place all the time. So put the salt roast in hard competition with the Tivan Plus. At Speewah, it might be that the salt roast is better. It'll be much lower capex, known technology, and you may have a cleaner pathway given the mineralogy at Speewah. So we keep chugging down those paths, Larry. They're both open, they're both interesting, but they're not our nearest priority at the moment. On government support, in fact, do you mind, I think I was talking to Bruno before, and I want to give the floor to Bruno, because Bruno, for those who don't know, Bruno Damasi was key to the shareholder activism campaign and inspired me to get involved and step up. Without Bruno's involvement at the top, none of this happens. Bruno and I were just talking before about government aspects. So Bruno, if you want to say something, or indeed ask the question with Larry's question about government, I can refine it a bit and try to answer it.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple of questions, but just want to endorse what you're saying, Larry. Really great. Team, terrific. Just make sure you got to look after Grant, because he's got to be in tip-top shape. So he's not sure how many nights he's sleeping, but make sure he's in tip-top shape. Another hard year ahead, but thank you. 3 points. Look, in terms of obviously the feds in Canberra, obviously talking to them, are they going to basically come to the party, support us, and what does that support look like?
Sure. So, in terms of what I said at the top, Tivan, our mission to become a strategically important company across Northern Australia, we know for sure that, to Guy's point, both sides of politics are completely committed to Northern Australia. If you look at the statement on the development of Northern Australia from Minister King just last week, you'll see that the feds are committed to about $30 billion of expenditure across Northern Australia. So that's a huge priority for them. We've got mobilisation of US military. You've even got Japanese engagement, amphibious training in the Northern Territory for the first time. So we know that Northern Australia has become a theatre, and it's critically important for both sides of politics. And then, as Guy said, we know that the impetus on critical minerals is hugely important, and we know that both sides of politics is trying to find ways to cut through with traditional owners and on country. So in that Venn diagram, Tivan sits right in the middle, and that was by design. So it stands to reason that the federal government should be there to support us when we need them. And I would say that I feel acute responsibility to deliver this for the company. And that would go in terms of the very highly scrutinised International Partnerships and Critical Minerals Grant Program. A lot of people have asked about this. I know that it's online. It's a topic. Will Tivan get this grant? Obviously, it would be transformative if we were able to do that. I can confirm I was in Canberra recently, last week, and this was discussed. And I think all I can say today is that it's a very competitive process. I think there was up to about 100 companies that applied for this $40 million pot, and I'm confident that the merit of our proposal, which was based upon our international partnership with Sumitomo Corporation, along with the criticality of fluorite, along with our low capex, is a perfect presentation that we've made. So watch this space, Bruno, on the grant, very important. And then the bigger picture is, can we mobilise the debt financing with Export Finance Australia and with NAIF? And on that side of things, again, they're sensitive, in terms of us saying things publicly, but fair to say that we've got great relationships, got sophisticated financial professionals, not just at the company in executive positions on the board. Finance at that level is about trust. It's about trust. And it's hard sometimes for those big agencies to trust proponents. It is not hard for those agencies to trust Tivan, given the calibre of the people that we have on the company. So Bruno, I can say that Canberra is highly engaged now, particularly over the past month. So watch this space.
Awesome, that's great to know.
Actually, can I just answer your question about look after grant? Well, because it's an issue, right? I mean, as a board, he has sort of two hats on. I think growing out a team that you can trust with excellent people in them, I can see the delegation happening and the fact that the load is being shared, and that's a very critical issue for the board, actually. It's another form of sustainability, really, that we actually aren't burning out people, and particularly, the critical role that Grant has and will have going forward. So, yeah, on the agenda.
Well, that makes sense. The comment wasn't facetious, but
No,
it's
no.
good to know that there's some sustainable and good governance around it, which is really important. Two other things. Speewah, obviously, deep dive there. Obviously done some drilling. You had to pull out because of the weather. We're looking good on project expansions. Does project expansion look pretty good there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you look at that project schedule closely, you'll see that feasibility study is now scheduled for about June. And we'll have to make a big decision early next year. Do we go for the stripped down, fast track path to feasibility study, more or less with the existing resource? And so we're refining the engineering, we're bringing the cost parameters in closer, and we're taking that huge step on the stage gates with more advanced environmental baselines, hydrology studies, geotech, all of the good stuff that we've progressed. Or do we do resource expansion drilling as soon as it dries out, which we did not have time to do this year, obviously, and on the assumption that we have a lot more capital, should I say, available to us, instead of being out there with one drill rig, maybe we're out there with 3 or 4. and we really pull through quick. And in that world, you could expand the resource, and you can end up with that life of mine moving from 10.5 years out to 13, 15, even with a large part of Speewah being unexplored. If we go for that red pill, the feasibility study will take a bit longer. It'll be August, for example. Now, is it worth the wait? 2 months to get a larger resource? Probably. But it's a detailed and complex decision, and it's also about capability, funding, and so on and so forth. So that will be resolved in the next couple of weeks, but you're thinking down the right path. We all want it to be bigger, and in fact, what I really want on Tivan's balance sheet within, say, 2 years is 40 years of mine life. That's what I want. That's when the company will look spectacular, and that's a very achievable goal because we believe that, Speewah fluorite project, the resource is there, it's in the ground, we will be able to pull through with the permissions. It's just a matter of funding and drilling to expand that project out from, say, 10 years towards 20. And as I said during my substantive presentation, we're bullish at Sandover on the fluorite project. That could well have 20 years of reserve life right there. Then you can stack the projects up sequentially. You can pay for the second one out of the first one. Tivan shareholders could potentially get 2 projects, 40 years of resource life or mine life without issuing shares. And that would be not just the best case outcome, but that would be practically a miracle from where we were starting from. So that's what I'm shooting for. And yeah, we're on track.
Awesome. I've got one question. So I left. Sorry to those if I'm occupying the floor, but one final one. Again, Speewah, just on the joint venture structure.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of colleagues in the room that we love drawing boxes on pages, so we totally relate to that. And it's great to see that it actually has some worth. But question being, I think the sentiment came out through your presentation is all about, making sure we don't have dilution. And I look at those boxes, I look at the special purpose company you're creating. To me, you're looking at maintaining project equity and giving away, I assume, exclusivity around offtake. And if that's the case, that's great. How you get that project equity, you've mentioned that. But I think it's important, reading between the lines, is you're looking at preserving value for Tivan and its shareholders. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, it's a very fair assumption. I think when I look at joint venture structures that have been successful around the critical minerals sector, I look at MinRes actually. Now MinRes is not a company that I would like ultimately Tivan to resemble, but I think they've authored a lot of good joint ventures and they've had very good capital efficiency. I think they've only got 200 million shares on issue, which is outstanding for a really significant company. How did they get there? Smart, aggressive JVs and infrastructure. The companies that have gone down the other path, which is to take that burden of issuing ordinary shares, either can't do it and they're stuck, even if they don't want to say it, or they've blown their SOI out into the billions and they're really struggling and they're trying to get innovative, but in general it's too late or they don't have the share price to support that sort of issuance. So you can hear from that I strongly prefer the JV SPC route, but it's predicated on being strong enough at the negotiating table not to give up your project, because a bad JV will mean that you'll lose control of your project and you'll ultimately get diluted at the project equity rounds and there will be very little left for shareholders. So that's the negotiation that we're in. I would say, the one challenging aspect of a negotiation like this is that, we are a small company right now. Sumitomo Corporation is a very large company. When you have that sort of power imbalance at the deal table, you are trusting each other all the way to the finish line on a deal to refine the terms without either party taking advantage of the situation. But that's why I love working with Japan, because there's integrity and there's trust. And we've built that trust over 8 months. So I'm confident Bruno will arrive at a deal which is fair and which Tivan will be able to prosper with and which ultimately could lead to a second project with Japan as well. And so, that's really what I'm focused on. It's one of 2 big deliverable left for this year. Okay, we've got to diversify the questions while we've got some time. Please, anyone else? Down the back.
Professor Maria Skylis-Gazolkis, excuse me, Greek. She was on the board. I was just wondering what's happened to her. She had some fantastic ideas about redox flow batteries. Are we still involved there? Thank you.
Yeah, to be clear, on the top left of our team is a technical advisory group. So that's not part of our board. It's a team of world-class specialists in their respective fields who report to the board as a part of a good governance check. And we host meetings regularly, and there's periods of times where TAG, Technical Advisory Group, come together, or certain members of the TAG go into an intensive period of contribution to the company. So, for example, before the pre-feasibility study, we were really engaged with Stefan LeBlanc. Now, Stefan used to run Rio Tinto's iron titanium business globally. He's built many projects around the world in critical minerals. He's based in Canada. He's regarded as the most experienced and most esteemed project delivery engineer in the world in critical minerals. He was referred to me by BHP on that basis. So heading into the PFS, because there was a lot of work in that and we wanted to present a really industry-defining document, Stefan worked with us extremely closely on that, and Simon Flowers too in Darwin. Dr. Maria's, as you rightly say, she's sort of legendary in Australia as the inventor of vanadium redox flow batteries. They are taking off in massive size in China. The validation from China tells me that the technology is real, that we should still be trying to get down that path on vanadium, whether it's salt roast or Tivan Plus, because at the back end of that is a technology invented in Australia by Dr. Maria, which can really significantly contribute to the energy transition. So I was privileged to attend Dr. Maria's 40-year symposium. I spoke there on VRFB about 2 months ago at University of New South Wales. I know Dr. Guy Debelle's in touch with Dr. Maria. She's still part of the family, if I can put it that way, and she's incredible as a person. But on the day-to-day, right now, less engaged because we have moved away to focus on fluorite in the immediate term. Got about 5 minutes.
Michael Barrett. First of all, I just wanted to echo the sentiments of some of the earlier questions. Grant and the board, I think you're doing a fantastic job. A really ferocious work rate, so I congratulate you all on that. My question's more sort of like looking, I guess, further downstream and also forward in time. Grant, you talked about the Port of Wyndham, and I'm from a logistics background, and I agree with your sentiment. The Port of Wyndham's a very pretty place, but it's quite basic, and I just wonder what thoughts you've had around that particular port being the exit point for the product further down the track.
Thanks, Michael. And I recall you were here at the start of the activist campaign, so how far we've come. We're only looking to export, at this stage in the PFS, 125 to 140,000 tonnes of acid-grade fluorspar a year. The project could be bigger. We might add metspar, then we'd be pushing towards 200,000 tonnes per year. It's quite straightforward to break that down into 5,000 or 10,000 tonne shipments. We've worked really closely with Cambridge Gulf Limited on logistics, on down to containers, bulk shipping, and one-ton packs. There's various alternatives that we can use. When Sumitomo Group was here, a corporation was here a couple of weeks ago, we met with CGL. They've been engaged on port logistics for 3 or 4 months. Sumitomo Corporation, I think, would not mind me sharing that they are extremely advanced on distributing the product that we're looking to mine in terms of a prescribed set of tonnage for Japan, but then marketing our project in places like India and Korea, China and Taiwan as well. And so we know the demand for what we're planning to produce from Speewah is it's incredible. It really is. And we're so confident on that we are already deeply involved in designing efficient logistics and shipping from the Port of Wyndham. And because it's a highly refined product, 97% grade, the actual amount of volume through the port is easily manageable. That might change if vanadium came on, for example, down the track, but right now the Port of Wyndham is perfect, like completely fit for purpose. Yeah, please.
Before we get considered for government grants?
So the question was, do we need offtake agreements in place before we get considered for government grants? No. The importance of offtake cannot be underestimated. It's absolutely vital. And one of the great aspects of the joint venture that we've proposed with Sumitomo and the work that we've been doing with them is that we're able to leverage their incredible network, through Asia in particular. I mean, it's taken them centuries to build that, and they've got this incredible reputation. So if they ask for a meeting, it happens. There's no way that Tivan would have the capability to run around India, for example, and piece out aspects of the product suite or work through detailed specifications. It's very labour-intensive work. So the way that we've designed the proposed joint venture, and this is public, is to say that Tivan's share of offtake will be brought across to Sumitomo, and they will have exclusivity. And in lieu of that exclusivity, there were various aspects of the deal that came in our direction.
In consideration of?
Yeah, in consideration.
So
sorry.
not in lieu.
Yeah, you did say that before. And so we feel really comfortable. It's based on trust. Offtake is very important to closing binding project finance. So 12, 18 months, like that's the time where offtake has to be signed, sealed and delivered. Ideally, you want certain terms in those offtake contracts so that they are called bankable. But in terms of the near-term support that the company might avail itself of, particularly this International Partnership Critical Minerals Grant, the precondition for that was, do you have a great international partner? Do you have a viable project? Are you going to provide great bang for buck for the taxpayer? Things like that. And offtake is absolutely not a prerequisite for that.
One more. Sumitomo, are we just looking at fluorite, or are they looking at other products that we can supply?
Yeah, again, I'm sort of constrained by NDA in answering that question. I can confirm, I think, that when we bought the second fluorite project, there was great excitement in Japan. I think, yeah, they won't mind me saying this. Yeah. They wrote and said, Tivan is now the king of fluorite. So that was very kind. And we have spoken about vanadium and other things as well. I think I mentioned this on one of the calls, and I feel like I'm dominating here, so I'm very happy would love to hand over to the board here. But I'm quite sincere in saying that we're trying to invert the model, which is understand what Japan wants, understand even perhaps what Korea wants, and then go and find it or acquire it. And this thing that I'm referring to in January, February, which I can't talk about today, is part of that strategy. So the more that you can know your customers, be intimately connected, the more that they trust you. If we succeed in the joint venture, we deliver the project's on cost, on schedule, it's profitable. The advantages that we will have and the trust that we will build across Japan will be really significant. They in turn share what they're looking for. That informs decisions that we might make in building out the company as a strategically important company. There are two ways to grow, through acquisition, which we've proven we can do, two fantastic acquisitions. Do not underestimate that Sandover fluorite acquisition that Ellen led for us. Incredible deal for the company. And of course, we can find things, whether it's through artificial intelligence technology or new vistas, and there'll be more on this in the first quarter. So yeah, know your customer is a big principle. So Guy, do you want to talk about what Japan's looking for and in general the demand that we're seeing and how to think about China perhaps to close this out?
Yeah, I mean, Japan is very much looking to have, to secure their supply chains, clearly, and probably even more so after earlier this month, be not necessarily dependent on China as being part of that supply chain, but also, and Grant mentioned countries like India, so Japan is also looking at the downstream from them opportunities as well. But in terms of looking upstream, then Australia is basically at the top of the list. Well, not basically, it is actually at the top of the list because of their long experience in dealing with Australia. The Japanese government financing agencies have a long presence in this country. They know how Australia operates. They're comfortable with how Australia operates. So I think Japan sees Australia as its most trusted, reliable partner. Had 30, 40 years of working across any number of resources in that space, and so really that's the opportunity they see here. And as Grant said, it's a question of us looking to provide what they're looking for. But you know, they and Korea, as you mentioned, also are the countries which I think are most forward-looking. Putting aside China. In looking at the opportunities down the track in the critical minerals energy transition space. I'd say they're the most advanced in their thinking, and in both cases, a lot of that thinking ends up looking at Australia.
And Christine, maybe to close this out in the interest of time, I know that you've been working closely with Japan, I've lived in Japan. I know that you've been involved in various high-level discussions this year with Japan, and I also know we have a new presidency in the US and things are going to change potentially quite radically next year in Asia. I think you've used the word or the phrase you've said to me this year a few times that you've been somewhat taken aback by the urgency that Japan has shown in our situation and perhaps others. It feels like a shift, I would say. I think Tivan's part of that shift. But perhaps you could close us out by narrating for everyone what you're seeing, particularly this past 12 months in terms of Japan's engagement with Australia and how that might be influenced by President Trump re-emerging on the scene.
Look, I think it's an interesting observation because people, there are a lot of us that have actually had engagement with Japan over a long period of time. I feel like if you're not engaging currently, that you don't know what it feels like. So the speed with which decision-making is happening, the drive from a whole of Japan perspective around securing supply chain, diversification is just palpable. And I was at a foreign minister level kind of gathering in Canberra a couple of weeks ago on the Indo-Pacific and was talking to a very senior Japanese corporate representative who said, we are looking to attract and secure as fast as we can, but we have to have the right deposit and the right people. So it's that duo. And the other thing that really struck me is the chairman of JBIC, Japanese investment bank, was actually speaking about their approach. And he said, we are going to make decisions faster, we are going to make them earlier, we are going to take more risk, and we are going to look at not only we're going to look at equity, not just debt financing. And it was I was sitting there just thinking, it did not sound like what I'd expect from a very senior, very elder, statesman, Japanese representative, but that was just echoed. I mean, I'd have to say all the other countries that were there, and it was all the Indo-Pacific, small and large, were saying the same thing, but what you're seeing with Japan, probably even more kind of actively than Korea, is they've got teams out by the time, and I've got experience in other companies where by the time someone makes contact with you, they've done their DD, they know all about you, they know all about the deposits, and so that kind of makes sense about how fast they've moved because they didn't come to Tivan with a blank sheet, right? But I think the only way that you can truly capitalise on it is that deposit people equation. So don't forget the trust and the capability, and part of that conversation was, you have to grow that trust together, and if you blow it, if you're not honest, if you hide something, you can very quickly, and this was actually before the visit of Sumitomo, so I was very kind of mindful that in many ways it's kind of ours to lose. Now I'm quite confident of our culture and kind of behaviour, but it is an absolute shift, and what an opportunity, really.
Yeah, and if I may jump in, as a West Australian, we, as West Australians, we know that what it is that we produce mainly goes to the rest of the world, and that's going to be an ongoing theme for a state that has the resources that it's got and the relatively small population that it's got. And then Japan and Korea are obviously acting with urgency at the moment, but they know that they've been looking internationally for centuries for their resources. And this is a strategic theme that is going to remain ongoing, regardless of the extra tailwinds that we're getting right now. And without putting too much emphasis on it, obviously from what you've been saying, Christine, and the rest of the board, you know, this is not restricted to one Japanese organisation. This is across the board for organisations in Japan, in Korea, and beyond.
Okay. You get that privilege, Larry. Only you could. And then we have about 15 minutes of formalities to pull through, and I'll do it as quick and as painlessly as I can.
Can everybody hear? Now, our largest shareholder is the Indian conglomerate, the Vimsam Group, and their wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. I've heard nothing at all about India. Are they out in the cold now? Are we not doing anything with them?
So at Tivan, I made a decision right at the very top not to talk about individual shareholders. And we're very respectful of the journey that all our major shareholders have been on, which has been as difficult and as challenging as the journey that many retail shareholders have endured from TNG to Tivan. All I would say is that that top end of the register, the trust is extremely strong. I think that they understand the actions that Anthony and I authored saved their entire investment from complete failure. So the capital preservation component of Tivan's achievements resonates much more strongly with those major shareholders than it does with the hot copper crowd, who has still not come to peace with the mistake they made in investing with the previous management team. The instos understand that we saved them and all of their investment, and they're excited. And you can see that through the stability of their shareholding. You can see it in the votes, which I'm about to show. So it does not necessarily extend to offtake. We're operating at the top of the world. It does not get better than Sumitomo Corporation. It's a company that I deeply admire. It's been a great privilege to work with them. I will say, you've mentioned Vincent, they're focused on iron ore, that they're legendary for their iron ore business in India, in Japan. It's not a product that we're focused on. So with that, let me pivot to the votes. We have to keep running this company. To run this company, we have to have the backing of shareholders, which is why you're all here. I'll pull through the formalities, and then we'll go to the courtyard. And
you have to stay.
Okay, so now, Nicholas, our co-sec, if I say something wrong, which may accidentally invalidate the meeting, you have to put your hand up and stop me, because we don't want to have to do this again. So now it's on to the formalities. I ask that all shareholders ensure that they have registered their attendance with the representatives of Computershare. I think most people did on the way in. Shareholders and validly appointed proxies and corporate representatives will have received a green admission card. I'm advised that a quorum of this meeting is present, and therefore I officially declare the meeting open. I am joined at this meeting, as you just saw, by fellow board members, being Christine, Guy and Anthony. We also have present Nicholas Ong, our co-sec, as well as several of our senior staff, including Alin, who's our head of Northern Australia, Katrina, our VP of Engagement, and Alex, who's one of our process engineers. Jason Gilte came down with the bug this week. He was going to be here. He's our CFO. I think he's online right now with Glenn Brooks of KPMG, auditor of the financial year 2024, and attending via video link. So thank you both for joining. The notice of the meeting was made available to shareholders, and I will take the notice as having been read. By agreeing to take the notice as read, it means I will not have to read out the text of each resolution, just the header line, which will save us some time. All items of business will be voted on via a poll. The poll will be conducted by Computershare, and voting cards will be collected at the end of the formal part of the meeting once all resolutions have been put. The results of the poll will be tallied and announced on the ASX platform. We'll probably get that out first thing tomorrow morning. I will be allowing questions from shareholders, proxy holders and validly appointed corporate representatives on each resolution as it is being considered. I ask that you keep your questions on the matter being considered. Please address all questions to me as chair of the meeting. Please state your name before you speak and hold your green or yellow admission card so that I can see that you're entitled to speak at this meeting. After the poll is closed, shareholders will have an opportunity to ask questions about or make comments on the management of the company. Persons entitled to vote on the poll are shareholders, representatives and attorneys of shareholders and proxy holders who hold up a green admission card. On the reverse of your green admission card is your voting paper and instructions. Proxy holders have attached to their admission card a summary of proxy votes which details the voting instructions. By completing your voting paper, you are deemed to have voted in accordance with those instructions. In respect of any open votes a proxy holder may be entitled to cast, you need to mark a box beside the motion to indicate how you wish to cast your open vote. Shareholders also need to mark a box beside the motion to indicate how you wish to cast your votes. Please ensure you print your name where indicated and sign the voting paper. When you have finished filling in your voting paper, please lodge it in the ballot box to ensure your votes are counted. I now declare the poll open and we will move on to the formal business of the meeting. I advise that a total of 694,001 valid proxies have been received for the meeting. That represents a total of 38.62% of ordinary shares. That does not include my votes, so the turnout was a bit over 40% this year, which is great for a company such as this. Thank you very much for all the engagement. We really appreciate it. The proxy votes will be set out on the screen, and as such, I won't read the numbers out as we deal with the resolution. As chair, I am voting all the open proxies where I've been expressly authorised to do so, and I'll be voting in favour of each resolution. So these numbers will change a little bit, not much, by tomorrow morning when it goes out on the ASX, but you can see more or less the outcomes already. For financial statements and reports, the first item of business deals with these for the financial year ended 30 June 2024, which are now laid before the meeting. As previously mentioned, representatives of KPMG are present to answer any questions shareholders and proxy holders may wish to direct to them in relation to the conduct of the audit, the preparation and content of the auditor's report, the accounting policies adopted by the company in relation to the preparation of the financial statements, or the independence of the auditor in relation to the conduct of the audit. I now invite questions and comments on the financial statements and reports. Are there any questions? Thank you. So I'm now going to move swiftly on to the resolutions. Resolution 1 deals with the adoption of the remuneration report. This is a non-binding advisory ordinary resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. I direct your attention to the screen which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Are there any questions or comments in respect of this resolution? Okay, so now I can move to the second resolution, which deals with the election of Dr. Anthony Robinson as director. I advise that this is an ordinary resolution. The directors, with Dr. Robinson abstaining as required, unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of the resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. And I extend my congratulations to Dr. Robinson for being practically unanimously elected for, I think it's another 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. So thanks to Anthony for everything that he's contributed to the board and the journey over the past couple of years. So as I have an interest in the next resolution, I now pass the chair role to Christine.
I'll just stand here.
Yeah.
Yep. Resolution 3 and 4 deal with the issue of March 2024 placement shares to Mr. Grant Wilson and Dr. Anthony Robinson and or their nominees. I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions. The directors, with Mr. Wilson and Dr. Robinson abstaining, unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of these resolutions. I direct your attention to the screen which displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chairperson will be voted in favour of the resolutions. Are there any questions or comments in relation to these resolutions? I now move to the next resolution and I'll hand the chair back to Grant.
Okay, thanks Christine. Resolution 5 deals with the ratification of issue of SBC convertible securities, options and shares to the SBC Global Investment Fund. This is the convertible bond that got us through a very difficult moment in Q1. I extend my thanks to L1 for their professionalism. They were here tonight from New York. Incredible. So thank you. I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions. The directors unanimously recommend the shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. Are there any questions or comments on these resolutions? Okay, resolutions 6 and 7 deal with the ratification of the issue of July 2024 placement shares and options. I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour. I direct your attention once again to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies. Are there any questions or comments here? I'll now move onwards to the next resolution 8, which deals with the approval to amend the option terms. I advise this resolution is an ordinary resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. This one's important because for those that participated in the placement recently, and there was a lot of retail support, you can see that in the the original entitlement offer, the first tranche, and even that second tranche, which was heavily oversubscribed. We announced that at the start of this week. There was a really significant amount of retail interest in that, unsolicited by us. And Katrina, for those of you, many of you here will know, was being bombarded for weeks about it. I'm saying this because retail has been fundamentally important to our journey and remains so. And in that entitlement offer, there are 12-cent options 3 years out. This resolution means that with the breadth of ownership of those options and the success of this resolution, we can now list those options on the ASX. They will be trading. I believe they'll be much more liquid than the 30-cent options because the delta's lower. They'll be exciting. I think they'll be in the money soon, so we'll see. So that's approved. Having those options listed is really important for the capital structure of the company. Okay. Resolutions 9 to 16, now on the screen. Resolution 9 deals with the approval of the updated awards plan. I advise that this resolution is an ordinary resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. Are there any comments or questions? The next resolution 10 involves myself, so back to Christine.
Resolution 10 deals with the grant of performance rights to Mr Grant Wilson or his nominees. I advise that this resolution is an ordinary resolution. The directors, with Mr Wilson abstaining, unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chairperson will be voted in favour of the resolution. Are there any questions or comments in relation to this resolution? I now hand the chair of the meeting back to Grant Wilson.
Okay, Resolution 11 deals with the grant of NED performance rights to Ms Christine Charles or her nominee. I advise this resolution is an ordinary resolution. The directors, with Christine abstaining, unanimously recommend the shareholders vote in favour. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies. Are there any questions or comments here? Resolution 12 is a similar resolution of grant of NED performance rights to Dr Anthony Robinson or nominee. I advise this is once again an ordinary resolution. Directors, now with Dr Anthony Robinson abstaining, unanimously recommend the shareholders vote in favour. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution, and ask if there are any questions or comments. Okay, we're nearly there. Resolution 13 deals with the grant of NED performance rights to Dr Guy Debelle. Once again, same process. I advise that this resolution is an ordinary resolution. The directors, now with Guy abstaining, unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Are there any questions or comments here? Okay, Resolution 14 deals with the approval of the additional 10% placement capacity. I advise that this resolution is a special resolution. As such, it requires a 75% majority to be passed. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of the resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies. And I will make a comment here. This is an important resolution, not because we intend to issue 25% of shares next year. We don't. As I said, we expect the shares on issue chart, which I displayed in the pack, to flatline next year. We've done our job with these difficult cap raises to restore the health of the balance sheet, paying down the debts associated with the acquisition that we made, the fantastic acquisition that we made. We wanted this to have maximum optionality over the project finance round, but please understand that this is not our aim. Our aim is to finance the Speewah fluorite project through joint venture and the use of special purpose vehicles. So it's a great alternative to have. It strengthens my arm at the negotiating table, these big tables, so we do really appreciate it, but please do not be concerned about this. Okay, resolution 15 deals with the issue of KRR shares. I advise that this resolution is an ordinary resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Are there any comments or questions related to resolution 15? And finally, resolution 16 deals with the appointment of Grant Thornton Audit Pty Ltd as auditor. I advise that this resolution is ordinary resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. I direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies. Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Okay. As that was the last resolution, I now ask that you finalise your votes. So if you are old school, Larry, and you've brought your pen and you want to sign off on those votes in person, this is your moment. I now ask that you finalise your votes. In a few minutes, Computershare will collect all voting cards. If you have any questions about how to fill in your voting card, please raise your hand and Computershare will assist. So we're just going to collect the polls as efficiently as possible. For those online, we're about 1 minute away. 1 minute, I would say. Okay. Okay, as all the voting cards have been collected as I speak, is that a green phone? Yes, it's a phone. Okay, it's not a poll card. Okay, so as all voting cards have been collected, I now declare the poll closed. The votes will now be counted by Computershare, and then, as I mentioned, we'll announce the results in the morning on the ASX platform, but you can see already from the proxies where this is heading. So I really want to say thank you to shareholders, institutional and retail, for supporting us. As I said, I think the turnout will be above 40%, which is fantastic for a company like this and the journey we've been on. That does conclude the formal business of today's meeting. Again, please walk away with that sense that we've got near-term objectives as near as Christmas. We're really focused on closing out this banner year. The achievements of this company and our team this year will be something to reflect on. And then we've got this really well-defined strategic mission for the company. You know, we want in the years ahead, for when people think about Northern Australia, they think about Tivan. They think about our footprint, they think about the way that we're cutting through, they think about our comparative advantages so that we can build a company which is of durable value to shareholders, both small and large. So thanks once again for your attendance today, really appreciate it. Let's go enjoy some drinks. I now officially declare the meeting closed. Thank you.